macro can be done in the iPhone with or without lenses. If you want to refer to my last video where I talked about the different options on macro with the iPhone, there's a link in the description for that. This time I'm going to go over the differences between what it looks like with a macro lens or without. So let's start with some of the pros and cons of not using a lens, of just using the built-in macro functionality of the iPhone 13 or 14 Pros, or you could use some of the apps I mentioned in that last video where they have macro capabilities like Halide, Camera Plus, that sort of thing. So one of the pros is that you don't need to buy hardware. You can just pull your phone out of your pocket. If you see something you want to capture a macro photo of, you can use whatever app you're going to use and sneak up on your subject and take your shot. Um, the other pro is that you don't have to carry that hardware with you wherever you go. So like I said, if you want to just pull it out of your pocket, take the picture, away you go. Some of the cons is it's harder to isolate your subject, and we'll cover that when we look at some of these images. And the other con that I can think of with regards to using no lens is that some of the images tend to look a little over processed. And again, we'll see that in a minute when we look at these. So here I have some pictures that I've taken, recently with no lens on my iPhone, and I just used the built-in macro functionality of my 14 Pro Max. And as you can see, as we go through these, they don't look too bad. They look pretty good. And but the problem is it's not isolating the subject very well. So as you can see with this one here, these purple flowers, they all look fairly similar, as they should, but there's nothing that really stands out. When we look at the ones that I've taken with the lenses, you'll see what I mean by the difference there. These little flowers, these little forget-me-nots, they're so small, they're about the size of my little fingernail. And but in this particular case, they kind of stand out because they're blue. Everything else in the background is green with the grass and whatnot. This yellow flower, I don't know my flowers, but this yellow flower is it's a nice macro shot of this thing. And the camera seemed to do pretty good by focusing on the stamen a little bit. Then we go into this shrub with yellow and green leaves, and but it looks like a bit of a confused mess. So you'll see the difference again when we get to the ones taken with the lens. And this is just a little flower that's in a little flower pot in our backyard. And uh, again, nice macro shot. I mean, it's not too bad. I wanted the sharpness around the edges of these petals in the middle, and you can see some of the detail on the green leaf in the background. And we have some cedar trees right next to our property, and just to get some detail on these cedar leaves, you can get in nice and close with a macro. Our big tree out front is flowering really nice right now. It is just so full of these blooms, and they make great macro subjects. So these are images taken with just my iPhone 14 Pro Max with no macro lens on them, just the macro functionality of the phone itself in the Apple Camera app. So now we'll go through these again, and we'll compare the first ones that you saw with the counterparts, the ones where I took with the lens. I used my reflex long range macro, and first we'll go over some of the pros and cons of using a lens. So the pros, I think it gives a more artistic looking image and a nice shallow depth of field. It shows the point of focus a little better, and the lenses can be used both on the main or the telephoto camera, depending on just how close you want your subject to look. Some of the cons, well, it costs money to have these lenses. You have to buy them, right? Um, you have to carry them with you. So if you're out and you see a nice macro shot, if you don't have the lens with you, then you have to resort to using the macro function of your phone or app or whatever. And you won't have that lens to get that certain look. Um, Sometimes it's a little more difficult to achieve focus with a lens, but focus peaking helps, especially if you use a third party camera app. And uh, I'm going to finish off with looking at these images, looking at one that I did, with focus stacking. So that, that tricky stuff like that, you can't really do that with these apps that don't, they don't allow for that. Not in macro anyway. And so now we'll go through and uh, compare the ones that were taken with no lens to the ones that were taken with the lens. So we'll start with the first one, the yellow shrub. And, you know, there's no isolation of a subject here. It's just you see a lot of yellow leaves and a couple of blossoms or whatever. But now if you take the one with the lens and compare it, you can see that the subject really stands out. Everything in the background is really nice and blurred. And and I just took these real quick. So I didn't really try to get focus points and all that stuff. Um, they were just taken for the purposes of illustration here, to show you the differences. And but you can see the flower down in here. And so the next one, these purple flowers, okay, so this is without the lens. Everything almost looks like on the same focal plane. But then when you look at the one taken with the lens, this particular flower, you can see the center it's almost in focus, but some of the edges of these petals are focused, yeah, in focus. And uh, I think it just makes for a little better image artistically. These forget-me-nots, again, not a bad shot when taken without a lens, but put the lens on it, and I think it makes a real big difference. You can see the flower right at the forefront is mostly in focus, but the depth of field is so shallow with these things, it's hard to it's hard unless you angle your camera a certain way. It's hard to get everything on a little flower like that in focus. But again, I was just quickly snapping these for illustration. I wasn't really trying to uh, make anything of them. Here's this yellow flower again. The background is somewhat clear. You can kind of see things in the background, but if you put the lens on, it really blurs the background, gives you a better artistic look. And ideally I like to focus on the stamen around, the center of the flower or the edges of some petals. Here's this yellow and green shrub where everything looks kind of confused and convoluted. When you put the lens on, again, it isolates the subject. Clear focus around the edge of the leaf. It just gives you a better idea of what you're looking at. The flower in the backyard in our flower pot, without the lens, and then with a lens, isolates the flower nicely. Point of focus is on the edge of the petals, and looking back and forth at those, the leaf on the top side of the frame, it shows the texture glistening in the sunlight almost the same way, but I think it's just a little more clear when you use the lens. The cedar leaf, kind of a convoluted image. It's kind of a bit of a mess. Put the lens on, isolates it from the background. You see a lot better detail, sharpness, crispness in the image. And again, shallow depth of field, so tricky to get it all in focus. But for the most part, I think I did pretty good in that one. The blossoms on the tree out in my front yard, again, it doesn't look too bad. It looks like a pretty decent macro shot. Put the lens on, and it makes a big difference. You can see where I've isolated the focus on some of the stamen, in these little things. These are really, really small flowers on this thing. So it was hard to pinpoint a sharp focus on some of these things. And then this one was the one that I did with focus stacking. I actually choked my iPhone with this one because when I took it, I used Camera Pixels. It's the only camera app I have that can do focus stacking. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I set it up for about 60 images. I think I got 54. And and I was trying to focus, at the very forefront of the whole set of leaves to I don't know, not all the way back, but I wanted to get a lot of detail. And it was shooting 48 megapixel JPEGs. So, trying to shoot 60 of those right in a row, it finally choked out and I just stopped the exposure process. But I was able to put them together in Affinity Photo and come up with this. It shows the detail real nice. And if you zoom in on the uh, on the leaves, I guess it's a spider plant. You can see this woven pattern, which is really cool. And that's not something that's you wouldn't see that just trying to take a regular shot of that thing. So those are some of the uh, differences that you have when you shoot with a lens or without a lens. And I much prefer to shoot with the lens because even though the depth of field is much shallower, I think the image looks more clear. I guess I could say another pro to that would be I could shoot in RAW and process it that way. I could shoot a 48 megapixel image with my main camera on my 14 Pro Max, which makes a really big difference in image quality. And you know, but again, it's all subjective. It depends on what you want to get. But I have a lot of fun with this. I just wanted to show you the differences between the two, and I hope it kind of helps you decide what you want to do with your macro, whether you want to put the expense out for a lens or be happy with what you can get for quality without the lens. I should say too that the quality you would get with an app like Camera Plus or um, Halide, where they use no lens, but they can zoom in and get the macro, they're not going to look as clear as you would get with a lens. It's just not going to happen. You can't beat optics in this stuff. So um, I definitely prefer to use a lens, and I will always use a lens with macro unless I'm, you know, like I said earlier, if you're out taking a walk somewhere, you see something you want to get a macro of. But I generally don't take them for any reason to keep them or anything. It's just I just love to take pictures, so it's just what I do. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and leave a comment down below with what your preference would be with a lens or without. If you have a lens, do you use it? If you have one, what kind? Let me know. And I guess we'll see you on the next one.